rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Good afternoon, everybody, and I want to welcome you to Tuesday's segment of End of the Age. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and I want to thank you for joining me today. There are so many prophecies concerning the end time that are converging simultaneously, that unless you're really on top of it and really following them, you can miss them. And so that's what the Lord has called us, is that we specialize in the prophecies of the Bible, and He's allowed us insight to help look at current events, how they're going on in the world, and to see how these prophecies are coming to pass right now, letting us know that we're truly in the end time and just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And I want to talk to you about some stuff that happened over the past few days. And one of these major prophecies that we're watching being fulfilled on a continual basis, leading up to the fulfillment in just the next little while, the next few years, when it will really come into play. So let's talk about it. What are precursors to this prophecy, and how is it being put into place? In Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 through 8, it deals with the prophesied world government and the leader of that world government, the Antichrist. In Revelation 13, 11 through 15, it foretells the coming one world religion, and it focuses on the leader of that one world religion, the false prophet at that time. And it states that this world religion will be used to garner the support of the global religious community and point that allegiance towards this one world governing body and the Antichrist. Well, we are currently watching this union of politics and religion, this world governing body and this world religious system. They're at work in the world today, and they're already kind of moving in that direction. And we're watching it happen in many ways. But something happened over the last few days that I really want to focus on in today's program. On September 1st, Pope Francis spoke at the celebration of the World Day of Prayer for the care of creation. And in that speech, he focused on global warming, which leads to climate change. Now, he's at the World Day of Prayer, but yet he used his time to talk about the sins that we have done by emitting carbon emissions, which supposedly causes the earth to warm, which leads to climate change. So in the speech, he actually says, the earth cries out because of the sins that we have committed against it. He goes on to state that with this message, I renew my dialogue with every person living on the planet. Global warming continues due in part to human activity. So we're causing this to happen, supposedly. And he states that 2015 was the warmest year on record, and that 2016 will likely be warmer still, in his opinion. He goes on to state that this is leading to ever more severe droughts, floods, fires, and extreme weather events. Climate change is also contributing to the heart-rending refugee crisis. So he's blaming this refugee crisis on climate change. He actually stated, because of what we've done to the earth in causing this, that we have all sinned. And so what is his solution to the climate change problem? Well, he states that the protection of our common home requires a growing global political consensus or an agreement. And along these lines, he states, I am grateful that in September of 2015, the nations of the world adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, and that in December of last year, they approved the Paris Agreement on climate change, which set the demanding yet fundamental goal of halting the rise of the global temperature. Well, the Pope's solution to the problem of global warming, which leads to climate change, is more power given to the global governing structure of the United Nations. Both the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on climate change are United Nations propaganda enforcement methods to further the process of global governance. Now, you might be asking yourself, what in the world, why would Pope Francis use his time during his speech at the World Day of Prayer to talk about global warming and climate change? Well, we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, but it was just prior to President Obama and the G20 meeting that was held in China on September 1st. We're going to talk about it here in a minute because you remember that the union of politics and religion, this world religious system is going to be set up, and it's going to be used to cause the religious community to pledge allegiance to this one world governing body. And so you have Pope Francis at the World Day of Prayer talking about global warming and climate change and the sins that we've committed against the earth in supposedly causing that to happen. And then on September 1st, you have the G20 meeting where Obama and the leader of China signed on to that. And they formally ratified the United States and China onto that Paris Agreement. So you say, well, what's the Paris Agreement on climate change? Well, negotiators from nearly 200 countries gathered in Paris last December and reached the world's most significant agreement to address climate change. Well, what does the Paris Agreement do? Well, the Paris Agreement requires any country that ratifies it to act to stem its greenhouse gas emissions, which they say that because of the greenhouse gas, carbon emissions that humans are emitting, that we're causing the earth, the planet to warm up, which creates climate change and all these weather catastrophes. So that's the stated crisis that they say is happening in their opinion. Well, it goes on to say that countries will aim to, as a result of this Paris Climate Agreement, countries will aim to keep global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100, with an ideal target of keeping temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is extremely minimal. The deal will also encourage trillions of dollars of capital to be spent adapting to the effects of climate change, and the text of the agreement includes a provision requiring developed countries to send $100 billion annually to their developing counterparts beginning in 2020, which is the process of transferring the world's wealth, its wealth redistribution. And that figure will be a floor that will be expected to actually rise with time, more than $100 billion a year. The agreement gives countries considerable leeway in determining how to cut their emissions, but it mandates that they report transparently on those efforts. And every 5 years, the nations will be required to assess their progress towards meeting their climate commitments and submit new plans to strengthen them. So that's the Paris Agreement. Well, on September 3rd, just this last Saturday, the Pope gave his speech last Thursday on September 1st. On September 3rd, just Saturday, the United States and China announced that they are formally joining the Paris Agreement, committing us to this to combat climate change. The accord requires 55 countries to join, representing 55% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions before it enters into force. They're hoping it'll happen before the end of the year. Well, together the U.S. and China represent nearly 39% of the world's emissions. And they're joining 24 other countries that have already signed on to the agreement. So, why am I telling you this? Because you have the Pope on one hand that's saying, hey, you've sinned against the earth. And you have, because humans have emitted so much carbon dioxide and all these other gases, that we've caused the planet, the temperature of the planet to rise, and it's led to climate change, which you have rising sea levels and all kinds of tornadoes, hurricanes, all these different climate catastrophes. You say, well, why? And then he endorses having the Sustainable Development Goals and the this Paris Agreement that we just signed on to. He's stating, hey, we need more of that. I'm happy that we've done that in trying to stem the tide. So his goal is more reliance on this global governing entity called the United Nations. You say, well, why would Pope Francis be involved in this process at all? He's a religious figure of these, obviously the most recognized religious figure on earth. Why would he be involved in global warming, climate change, promoting this global governing structure called the United Nations? Well, what I want to do today, I wrote an article on this, a very detailed article, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I want to go back and go through some of it. And what I want to do, let me just give you a little history as to why Pope Francis might involve himself in the climate change discussion. It's very, very important. Do you remember the Pope's encyclical that was published last June? Well, the Pope's encyclical was a call for a world government, a world governmental body, to manage the climate change hoax. You say, hoax? So hold on a minute. You say, hold on a minute, Dave, I actually believe climate change is real. Well, yeah, the climate has changed every day since the Lord created the earth. It could be 90 today here in Dallas, Texas, and it could be 75 tomorrow. Bang. The climate just changed. So, but they're saying that we've created this somehow by emitting carbon dioxide and these other different gases. We've caused the planet to temperature to rise, and we've caused this. And so the problem is that it's a hoax. Global warming, which leads to climate change, is an absolute hoax. But yet these people that believe in a world governing body, they've created this crisis in order to implement and to enforce their goal, which is global governance. Hey, we've got this huge crisis on our hands. Now we need a global government to manage that. So that's the goal. So let me talk to you about how it's happened and what's going on. Let me give you some history, and then we'll go into the Pope's encyclical. Basically, fear is an emotion caused by the threat of danger. You think something's going to happen, you go into fear mode. And for thousands of years, fear has been used by pharaohs, kings, European monarchs, emperors, caliphates, presidents, politicians, and even religious leaders to enslave the populace. Over time, the process has been refined, but the objective has never changed. It's all about control. If I can get you in fear mode, I can control you because you'll do things when you're afraid that you'll never do otherwise. You become irrational. You kind of go out of your mind a little bit, and I can get you to do things. If I'm a dictator and I've got you in fear mode, I can control you. So in today's society, the concept is simple, and it's been extremely successful. Promote a crisis, whether it's a real crisis, or it's an imagined crisis, which creates fear among the people. Once that is established, then I declare that, hey, we need more government oversight to oversee this crisis that we have. But the problem is that me as the government, I created the crisis to begin with because I wanted to have more government oversight. You see how it goes? And we're talking on a global scale here. It's done nationally around the world, but I'm talking today about the global scale. And then they'll actually declare the solution: government oversight, gross taxation, more surveillance, and increased regulation. And they offer the only solution there is, miraculously. But you see, the goal all along is greater dependency on the government as the citizen's protector and provider, which leads to more control. The crisis is used by presidents, politicians, and religious leaders around the world today as a means to an end. Look at the global warming and climate change hoax, and I'm going to prove to you in a minute it's a hoax. If you follow this program at all, you know that we teach, and it's the truth. It's easy to prove. Global warming, which leads to climate change, is an absolute hoax. But yet it's being broadcast worldwide. Global elites around the world are spreading the deception that mankind has caused the surface of the planet to increase in temperature due to greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and others that humans have emitted. So we're causing the problem. They warn that if this goes unchecked, that the planet could experience rising sea levels, increased rain and snowfalls, more damaging wildfires, heat waves, health risks, droughts, hurricanes, and declining freshwater supplies and floods. So that's the crisis. They've created it. Hey, global warming, which leads to climate change, which we caused it, it leads to all kinds of these weather catastrophes. So they're blaming it on us. You guys have caused it. Humans have emitted so much of these greenhouse gases, you've caused the earth to warm up, and now we have climate change. Only this time their agenda is not to achieve greater reliance on a national government, but global warming or climate change is considered a universal problem. We all breathe the same air, we share the same water, and rely on the same dirt to produce our food. So therefore, the solution must be an international authority or a global governing body to manage this. The global warming crisis was created for one single purpose: to establish a world governing body that will control the lives of every person on earth. What you produce, what you consume, everything. It's a total, complete hoax. You say, well, hold on a minute, Dave. Man, there are reliable news sources out here that are claiming that this is true. Well, is it really true? Let me take you back to the encyclical published by Pope Francis in June of 2015, and that might help us answer why he is involved in the climate change discussion today. Just last Thursday at the World Day of Prayer, when he used that platform to talk about the global warming, climate change scare and the crisis, and he actually stated that we have sinned in causing this to happen. Why is he even involved in that? Why not just share the gospel? Share the gospel of Jesus Christ and the love of Jesus Christ. Why not just share that? Why get involved in climate change and global warming, which leads to climate change? Let's answer that question. You remember the age-old ruse that I just talked about: create a crisis to establish fear in the hearts and the minds of people, all the while trumpeting the pre-designated solution. What they don't realize in doing this is that the world government that they seek to establish, and that's the goal, world government, that's the one that's prophesied in the Bible to be in power at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Revelation chapter 13. So let's talk about it. The fictitious crisis of global warming. It's very important that you understand global warming is a hoax. It's an absolute hoax. Global warming, which leads to climate change, is an absolute hoax. Let me give you a few proofs. Very easy to understand. Number one, global warming has not occurred in almost 2 decades. They say the earth is heating up. It hasn't heated up in the last almost 2 decades. And if it does heat up a little bit, the earth has a way of cooling itself down. So God made a way to regulate the temperatures of the earth. Number two, in 2007, Al Gore claimed that the North Polar ice cap could be completely gone by 2014. This is 2016. However, reports showed that the Earth's polar ice caps have not receded at all since the satellite instruments began measuring the ice caps in 1979. Some of them are growing. The third proof, the number of heat waves has diminished, not increased, according to John Coleman, the co-founder of the Weather Channel. Number four, in Greenland, think about Greenland today. There's about 8 to 10 feet of ice that covers almost all of Greenland. Think about that. But the Norse Vikings arrived in Greenland around 980 AD and were able to farm the land at that time. Today, about an 8 to 10, 12-foot ice cap. but they were farming that land back in 980 AD. But due to a rapidly cooling climate, they were forced to leave, and by the mid-15th century, their settlements were abandoned. They couldn't farm anymore. They had to leave because it was cooling down. Now there's an 8 to 10 foot ice cap there. So currently, 80% of Greenland is covered in ice, which means that it was warmer when the Vikings were there than it is today. Now let me ask you a question. Did the Vikings have coal-burning plants? No. Did the Vikings drive large SUVs? Absolutely not. Yet the global warming alarmists today say that these are the cause for global warming and that they must be abolished. Think about that. Well, number 5, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, their 4th assessment report, Climate Change 2007, states that since the start of the industrial era, about 1750, that the overall effect on human activities on climate change has been a warming influence. However, this report failed to mention the Little Ice Age, which lasted from around 1350 all the way to 1900. They failed to mention that. Of course, if I was spreading propaganda, I might leave out a Little Ice Age as well. You kind of get my point here. It's pretty easy to prove that global warming, which leads to climate change, is an absolute hoax. There's a goal behind it. Number 6, the same IPCC report claims it is likely that there have been significant anthropogenic or human-induced warming over the past 50 years, averaged over each continent. Well, what about the cooling period from 1940 to 1975, which actually prompted Newsweek, Time, and Fortune magazines to publish articles reporting on the global cooling trend, not warming. Some of them actually warned that we were headed towards another ice age. Global warming is a hoax, folks. Number 7, all this, and we haven't even touched on the fact that CO2 emissions have increased dramatically since 1998, but the temperatures have experienced a short decline, which it absolutely eviscerates the theory that human carbon dioxide emissions cause global warming. Now, these are just a few of the proofs that global warming, it's a non-crisis. There's nothing really, I mean, we're going to have hurricanes and tornadoes and things like that. That's just part of life. But yet they're saying, oh, this is a huge crisis and we need global government to manage it and take care of it. Well, that leaves me with the question, and I know it does a lot of you, if global warming is not destroying the planet, then why did Pope Francis spend so much time and effort in his encyclical trying to stop it? Well, it's a very important question and we need to talk about it. So I know we're going to come up to a break here in a little bit, so let me recap for you what we're talking about today, because it's very, very, very important that you get this, because I know you're following the news all the time and you know, a lot of you study prophecy. I know some of you are very, very educated when it comes to the prophecies. You've been following Irvin Baxter for years, and we've actually had people call us and say, hey, what have you guys thought about this? And we're like, wow, that's awesome. This guy caught it, and we might have overlooked something over the years. But in all of us studying together, and we're looking at the prophecies of the Bible and watching this stuff come to pass, it's easy to read your news and miss something big. And we need to know, because the Bible says we can understand the prophecies now. We do understand the book of Revelation. Irvin Baxter is presently doing a new Revelation commentary. Man, wait till you see that. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be ready hopefully towards the end of the year, first part of next year. And we've got a lot of new insights on the book of Revelation. And so you guys will be happy to see that. I mean, it's so cool. And it really will aid in your research when it comes to the book of Revelation. You'll be able to show it in your Bible studies and different things. But as a result of us understanding these prophecies, you read the news and it's like, oh my goodness, this stuff is converging like right now. We're just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's just a few short years away. Irvin Baxter, I've talked to him several times, and back when he started studying this, He said, hey, you know, Dave, a prophecy would happen every once in a great while. He said it wasn't like it is now where things are happening daily. We're following all of the prophecies that are supposed to happen just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. They're either happening right now or we're watching precursors to all of them. And so it's very important that we understand what's going on. Well, the prophecy I'm talking about today says, remember, Revelation 13, it describes a world government that's going to be established in the near future. And partnering with that world government is going to be a world religion. And this world religion is going to use its influence to cause all of the religious community in the world, which is the majority of the world, to pledge their allegiance or to follow after this one world governing body. It's in Revelation chapter 13. It's easy to see. When you get to the mark of the beast, that's what's going to be used to economically sanction individuals to pledge their allegiance to this world governing body. So it's very important that we understand what's going on. Here, we had Pope Francis last Thursday talk at the World Day of Prayer and stated, hey, global warming, which human-induced global warming causes climate change, and as a result, we have sinned against God's creation. And his proposed solution was, we need a global consensus, a global agreement on stopping this. And I'm going to show you here in a little bit that he actually, in his encyclical, proposed a global political authority or a global government to help manage this and stop this, to manage every person on earth so we don't continue to destroy the planet. So we're watching the prophecies coming to pass right now, and it's so important that we understand them. And if you want to watch, if you're only getting the first 30 minutes of this program, I'm going to go into the encyclical so that you can really understand what's going on. Go to endtime.com and watch the last 30 minutes of this program. It's so informative, and you need to know what's going on with the prophecies of the Bible.
Endtime Ministries has taught countless Bible studies about prophecy. One of our favorite places to teach is on the Mount of Olives, where Jesus will soon return, the Temple Mount, where the third temple will soon be built, and overlooking the plain of Megiddo, where the Battle of Armageddon will soon be fought. Being in the place where prophecies will soon take place brings them to life in a breathtaking way. In other words, our favorite place to teach prophecy is while on our Israel Prophecy Tour. You can be a part of it. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter October 27th through November 7th for a life-changing trip. For more details, go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. Sign up today. Time is running out.
There's a specific prophecy in Daniel chapter 11, verse 32 and 33. Listen to it. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And they that understand among the people shall instruct many. So right while the Antichrist is corrupting people with his false doctrines and with his flatteries, yet there's going to be a people who are strong for God. They're going to do exploits. And their assignment is the ones who understand should be instructing others who don't understand.
To order Endtime Ministries' bestseller, Understanding the End Time, call 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com.
If your station does not carry the full hour of End of the Age, go to endtime.com to hear the conclusion of today's broadcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And we're talking today about the prophesied union of politics and religion between the world governing body and the world religious system that is supposed to be, that's prophesied to be established just in the very near future. And we're watching precursors already happening to that. This is not hundreds of years away. We're looking at the culmination of this thing. And so that's what we're talking about today. The Pope recently used the platform that he had to give a speech at the World Day of Prayer to talk about climate change global warming, which leads to climate change, and that as a result of supposedly what humans have done to cause this, that we have sinned against God's creation. And he was actually saying that we need a global consensus or a global agreement with everybody to stem the tide of this, and that he was saying, and I'm thankful that we've had the Sustainable Development Goals, we adopted them in 2015, and this Paris Climate Agreement, and that we've adopted these things, which are united, they're global governing structures, they're enforcement methods of the global government to lead us into that. And so he's promoting these things. And so you say, well, why? Well, let's look back at his encyclical to see if he can help us, give us some foundation, some history as to why Pope Francis would have done this. So basically we're looking at, remember, establishing a crisis. The Pope devoted his encyclical to every person on earth by stating, now faced as we are with the global environmental deterioration, I wish to address every person living on the planet. Well, according to Pope Francis, human-induced global warming is what's causing this global environmental deterioration, which leads to climate change. He also stated, a very solid scientific consensus indicates that we are presently witnessing, now this is straight out of the Pope's encyclical, we're presently witnessing a disturbing warming of the climatic system. In recent decades, this warming has been accompanied by a constant rise in the sea level, and it would appear by an increase of extreme weather events. Even if now get this, even if a scientifically determinable cause cannot be assigned to each particular phenomenon. So he's saying global warming is causing all this, and then he said, but even though we can't tie that to every particular phenomenon, he states that humanity is called to recognize the need for changes of lifestyle, production, and consumption. So he's saying right here, we've caused this, so we need to change our lifestyles. We need to change our production and our consumption. In other words, later on, he's going to call for a world governing body to manage those things. Your production, your lifestyle, and your consumption. He goes on to state, in order to combat this warming, or at least the human causes which produce or aggravate it, we need to manage it. It is true that there are other factors, yet a number of scientific studies indicate that most global warming in recent decades is due to the great concentration of greenhouse gases released mainly as a result of human activity. Now, I don't know where the Pope got his information. Maybe he had some researchers that led him wrong. But what he's saying here is absolutely not true. You say, well, hold on, Dave, you're talking against the Pope. No, I'm talking against the encyclical that he put out. I'm sure he had people write this, but yet he actually had to sign on to it. So we need to talk about the truth of this stuff. Why is he endorsing this global governing body to help manage this? He goes on to state, warming has effects on the carbon cycle. If present trends continue, this century may well witness extraordinary climate change and an unprecedented destruction of the ecosystem with serious consequences for all of us. A rise in the sea level, for example, can create extremely serious solutions if we consider that a quarter of the world's population lives on the coast or nearby, and that the majority of our megacities are situated in coastal areas. Climate change is a global problem with grave implications, environmental, social, economic, political, and for the distribution of goods. It represents one of the most principal challenges facing humanity in our day. So that's the crisis in the encyclical. He's saying that we've got this unbelievable crisis staring us in the face, and we have caused it. And later on, he's going to say, and we know what the solution is. It's a world governing body to manage it. So that's the same crisis that Pope Francis, in his encyclical, it's the same one that he mentioned when he spoke at the celebration of the World Day of Prayer last Thursday on September 1st. So you say, well, hold on, the encyclical was last year. One of my points is that this propaganda is not going to simply disappear. They're not going to stop beating this drum of global warming, which leads to climate change. They're simply not going to stop that, because that's what the world governing body, all these globalists that believe in a world government, that's one of the methods that they have chosen to put us all in fear mode. So that way, once we get into fear mode, they can do things that they've never been able to do before. We would allow them to manage us more, this world governing body, because we're afraid. We're afraid the earth's going to heat up to the point where we'll have a tornado a day or something like that. The problem is that global warming is a hoax. So it's all propaganda. It's a spin to put everybody in fear mode to get them to accept the management of this global governing body. The encyclical proceeds to expound on, in great detail, the impact that this crisis, this hoax, will have on the earth. Remember, the global warming climate change forecast being sold to us by every way, the news media, President Obama, the United Nations, and now Pope Francis, it's simply not happening. It's a hoax. Nevertheless, internationalists with these people that believe in a world government, they view global warming and climate change as the perfect scheme to implement this world governing body. Why? Because every time a hurricane, a flood, a heat wave, anything, a polar vortex, get that, a heat wave and a polar vortex. That don't make no sense. A polar vortex, but yet the earth's warming up. Or really any kind of climate catastrophe occurs, it can be blamed on the unstable environment. And you say, well, why is it so good? Because it's a perpetual crisis. And it can be used to keep the citizens of the world in a constant state of fear. Next time there's a hurricane, climate change, everybody hunker down. You guys are causing this, so we need a world government. You can't manage yourselves, so we need this world governing body to manage you. What was it that Rahm Emanuel said? You never want to waste a serious crisis. And what I mean by that is an opportunity to do things that you didn't think you could do before. So, with this in mind, we have to ask ourselves, why the crisis? What's really going on here? Well, the crisis is only needed in order to realize the goal. What's the ulterior motive? What's going on behind the scenes that's driving this? Because they're not going to spend billions of dollars promoting this crisis and using some of the most influential people on earth to promote this crisis if they don't have an ulterior motive. What my question today is, what's the ulterior motive? Well, the answer is simple. It's a world government. The concept is simply this: humans cannot or will not manage themselves. That's what they say. That's not what I'm saying, but that's what they say. Therefore, they must be governed by a select group of more disciplined or better educated humans, i.e. globalists or internationalists. And since the supposed global warming and climate change hoax is affecting the entire planet, then a global management solution is mandatory to regulate every aspect of life for each person on earth. And believe me, they want to get very detailed how they manage each of our lives. Production, consumption, your very lifestyle. They believe that they have a right to manage that. How long you leave your lights on, how much food you eat. I mean, everything. It's going to get that detailed. They would love to be able to do that, and that's where all this is headed. That's their goal. Well, in his encyclical, Pope Francis advocated in more ways than one just such a global governing system in order to save the planet from the disfigurement and destruction of creation. Number one, he promoted sustainable development. He stated that the urgent challenge to protect our common home includes a concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development. So, the term sustainable development, so let's talk about that, or sustainable principles. They're referred to 21 times in the encyclical, Sustainable Development or Sustainable Principles. The ultimate impact of the sustainability agenda is a massive transformation of the social, political, technological, cultural, and behavioral processes which impact how mankind produces and consumes. Plain and simple. They want to control every aspect of your life. In other words, sustainability affects every single aspect of every life on earth. Green initiatives attempt to modify human behavior and to reward us for how we eat, how we work, how we travel, and play more sustainably. Sustainable development is a catchphrase. It's used by activists and government agencies involved in the implementation of Agenda 21, which according to the UN's own website is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally. It's going to come right down into our cities, whether you've got 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, you say, well, oh man, we're off the map, Dave. No. Nobody's going to be exempt from this if they have their way. And these are organizations of the United Nations system, governments, major groups in every area which humans impact the environment. That's right off the United Nations website. The ultimate goal of Agenda 21 is the control by the United Nations and a future one world government of all human settlements, determining where one can live and what land could actually should be used for. They want to manage every aspect of your life. Sustainable development equals world government policies to control the citizens of the world. Conveniently, in September of last year, Pope Francis addressed the UN General Assembly as countries gathered in New York to agree on a new set of sustainable development goals, which the President was all too happy to do. He signed the United States onto this. So what are we talking about? The ulterior motive to this global warming, which leads to climate change. Why the crisis? Why all the propaganda? Why? Because the ulterior motive, they know that they need a crisis to get this world governing body implemented. So what do? They create a huge crisis, which puts everybody into fear mode. And once you get into fear mode, I can get you to do things that you would never do before. And that's the goal of the global warming climate change. And Pope Francis spent his entire encyclical, I should say, to promote this and then to talk about the solution. And in the next segment, we're going to get deeper into the solution that he proposed to manage this.
For centuries, ministers have been preaching the coming of the Lord. Although they tried, they weren't able to understand the prophecies leading up to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Today, we are able to understand, not because we're smarter, but because the book of Daniel says the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Hi, I'm Judy Baxter. Irvin began studying Bible prophecy at a time when end-time prophecy was aligning with current events like never before. We have traveled around the world sharing the prophecies of the Bible. Now, 30 years later, almost anyone can get the end-time message via television, webcast, radio, magazine, and conferences. John 4:9 tells us to work while it is day, for the night comes when no man can work. Thank you, End-Time family. You have enabled us to work while it is day to reach the world. But time is running out. If you are not a partner, please consider joining us. Only eternity will reveal what will be accomplished together. God bless you all.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're talking today about the union of politics and religion that's being formed really right now on the earth. It's at the culmination. It's not the beginning. This has been being set up for years, and it's the prophesied union of politics and religion that will be in power, in union, at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ and at the Battle of Armageddon. Revelation, if you want to read about it, Revelation chapter 13, it tells about the world government, the world religious system and the false prophet, and the world economic system, the mark of the beast. So in the encyclical of Pope Francis, published in June of 2015, he's promoting world government. He starts off by promoting sustainable development. Then number 2, he talks about the Earth Charter. The Earth Charter project began as a United Nations initiative and asked us to leave behind a period of self-destruction, and it made a new start. But we have not yet, as yet developed a universal awareness needed to achieve this. This is in the Pope's encyclical. Here I would echo that courageous challenge as never before in history. Common destiny beckons us to seek a new beginning, to do away with the old way and to seek a new beginning. Well, not surprisingly, Pope Francis made an explicit reference to the Earth Charter, which was envisioned by its founders as a global governing, let's say, 10 commandments, managing the production and consumption of all humans. Now, you might be asking yourself, who could possibly manage the production and consumption of every human along with the water and all the different other things on earth? Well, of course, and with the water, the soil, the forest, all marine life on earth, and ensure universal health care and much more. Who could manage all of that? Well, the United Nations, of course. Who else? That's what these guys are promoting. That's the global governing body on earth today. The UN was designed to ultimately become a one world government when it was created in 1945. The original charter was written by Alger Hiss, a convicted communist spy, and they've never changed one word of that original charter. Well, the Earth Charter itself states, in order to build a sustainable global community, the nations of the world must renew their commitment to the United Nations, this world governing body, and fulfill their obligations under existing international agreements and support the implementation of the Earth Charter principles with an international legally binding instrument of environment and development. Well, that sounds like a call for a global governing entity, doesn't it? It is possible that the total reliance on the United Nations as that world managing system is the new beginning that Pope Francis was referring to in his encyclical. So the third way, he promoted a world governing management system to control or to manage this global warming, climate change hoax, was the enforceable international agreements. These are international things that would bind people, bind the nations together, and they would be able to manage them. Once you sign on to agreement, then you've got to stand by it. And so they could manage you. He goes on to state in the encyclical, enforceable international agreements are urgently needed since local authorities are not always capable of effective intervention. In other words, the local authorities aren't going to do anything about it, so us as global leaders need to. He states that what is needed, in effect, is an agreement on systems of governance for the whole range of so-called the global commons. The global commons being the international community, the one world community they're trying to establish. Well, in 2015, Pope Francis was pushing this plan for these international agreements every chance he got. In June, he published the encyclical devoted to the climate change and his proposed solution, a one world government. In July of 2015, he hosted at the Vatican 60 mayors from around the world to keep pressure on world leaders ahead of the UN climate negotiations in Paris later that year, it was in December, by signing the document, The Modern Slavery and Climate Change. The document states that human-induced climate change is a scientific reality. And I scratch my head over that one. Where they got that one, I don't have a clue. And its effective control is a moral imperative for humanity. Then in September 2015, Pope Francis spoke to the United Nations General Assembly, and according to the International Institute for Sustainable Development, in February of 2015, the UNGA President, Sam Katissa, proposed adjusting the beginning of the summit to 11 o'clock on the 25th of September to allow for an address by His Holiness Pope Francis at 9 a.m. Now, I didn't call him His Holiness. I'm reading this. And this is the same meeting where the United Nations agreed to the new set of Sustainable Development Goals. So that's the third way, international agreements that the Pope in his encyclical was pushing for a global government, a world political authority. And then the fourth and final way, which brings the whole encyclical right down to exactly what the ulterior motive is. Create a crisis. Kings, pharaohs, presidents, religious leaders have been doing it throughout time. Create a crisis, get everybody in fear mode so I can get them to do things that they wouldn't do normally. When you're thinking rationally and you've got a clear mind, you say, well, hold on, I'm not going to put up with that because, we've got rights and we've got this, that, and the other. But if you can get people in fear mode, get them to fear the chaos going on in the world, or this huge global warming, climate change, the earth's going to be destroyed and we're going to have droughts and floods and all this, which we do have droughts and floods, but those things have happened since the beginning of time. But the fourth way that, in trying to wrap this up before we get to the end of the program, the fourth way that the Pope pushed for a world government in his encyclical, and this sums it all up. It really brings it into just a real clear view of what really was going on. The fourth way was he actually called for a world political authority to manage this. He states, this is right out of the encyclical, given this situation, it is essential to devise stronger and more efficiently organized international institutions with functionaries who are appointed fairly by agreement among national governments and empowered to impose sanctions, as Benedict XVI has affirmed in continuity with the social teachings of the Church. Remember that statement right there. With the social teachings of the Church, the union of politics and religion to manage the global economy, to revive economies hit by the crisis, to avoid any deterioration of the present crisis and the greater imbalances that would result, and to bring about integral and timely disarmament. They're talking about disarmament. I'm like, disarmament, food security, and peace, to guarantee the protection of the environment and to regulate migration. For all this, in other words, to manage all of that, there is an urgent need for a true, listen closely, a true world political authority. And he states that, as my predecessor, John 23rd, indicated some years ago. So finally, here we have it, finally, in plain English, the objective of the entire encyclical is a world political authority. The crisis is irrelevant to these guys. Whether it's global cooling, back in 1945 to 40 to 75, an economic collapse, immigration, the threat of a nuclear war, whatever it takes to get people in fear mode, food shortages, plagues, real or imagined, it doesn't matter. As long as it produces fear, the global elite will use it to promote a one world government. That's the goal of this encyclical, is a prophesied one world government. We know that global warming is just a ruse by the global elite to establish a world government. It's very clear to see. Pope Francis is advocating a true world political authority to manage this supposed crisis. But the Bible foretells that in the end time, the world will be ruled by a world government. This global political authority will demand the allegiance of all world citizens and endeavor to control every aspect of their life. And in order for there to be complete obeisance among the populace, a one world religious system will be established to advocate devotion to the world governing system by all the religions of the world. You see, folks, it appears that we're witnessing just such a merger right before our very eyes. So you understand now why I wanted to let you know what happened last Thursday is because of the encyclical that Pope Francis put out in June of 2015 and everything that happened all throughout the latter part of last year, all the way up to in September, all the nations of the earth signing on to and pledging that they would implement the Sustainable Development Goals in their different countries. That was in September. And then in December, they all signed on to this Paris Climate Change Agreement, which I defined at the beginning of the program. As a result of all of that, now a lot of it's coming to fruition. Now, just before Obama and the president of China agreed to implement this stuff, they just signed on to this Saturday at the G20 meeting in China. The Pope comes again, and he has an opportunity to speak at the World Day of Prayer, 2 days before they're going to go to sign on to this Paris Agreement and ratify it in China. And just 2 days before, Pope Francis comes along again and uses his platform and gives a speech at the World Day of Prayer that says, hey, you guys have sinned against the creation of God, and you're causing the planet to warm, which is resulting in climate change, and we're destroying the planet. So you see how it all ties together. You don't have to ask at this point, why is Pope Francis, why would he use that platform to talk about global warming and climate change? Well, it's simple, because he believes that in global warming and climate change that we need to fully implement the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. That's why he probably chose 2 days before China and the United States signed on to this on Saturday to use that time to give a speech about this. And he actually mentions the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement in the speech at the World Day of Prayer. So you don't have to really scratch your head and wonder what's going on. And simply, this is not going away. There have been several popes over the last several decades. You can do your research. I mean, we've written articles about it that have called for a global political authority to manage the affairs of different crises that were going on at that time. And so now you know that the Bible called for it 2,000 years ago in Revelation chapter 13. The Bible prophesies there will be a world government formed, and teaming up with that world government would be a world religious formed, and they would work together, a union of politics and religion, to form, and they would be in power at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, what we're watching right now over the last few days is more steps being taken of that union of politics and religion that's already been established, and they're already working together, and it's going to become more of a union as we get closer to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So we're watching the prophecies being fulfilled on every side. I mean, they're all converging at the same time, letting us know we're just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ.
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.